I invite you to turn with me to the 14th chapter of the book of John, and this week we're returning to our study on church. And you'll remember a couple of weeks ago that what we discovered from the mouth of Jesus is that church is a group of people that share a common faith in Christ. Okay? Church isn't a building. Church isn't an organization. Church isn't tradition. Church isn't certain high holy practices. Church is one or more people, because you have to have more than one person to have a group, unless you're like me, in which case me and my personalities were never alone. But a group of people that are gathered together who share that common faith in Jesus Christ. And we saw that Jesus said that the church founded on that common faith was granted authority, was forward moving, the gates of hell would not prevail against it, and it's a church with authority. Okay, remember he talked about the keys. I give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. And we talked about the fact that heaven is going to bear the marks of the way we live the kingdom here on earth. If you'd like to catch up with those messages, maybe you didn't see them, or maybe you did and you want to afflict yourself twice, you can go online, go to the church website, and the messages are online there, videos, and you can follow us along. Well, I want to continue on with that. I want to build off that theme of authority. Christ said that his church has authority. In the book of Matthew, he said that my authority is given unto you, so go turn the world upside down. And indeed, those believers did. They went from a group of 11 people to millions who have heard the gospel and received Christ and share that common faith. So I kind of want to look a little bit more about that idea of authority. And so I appreciate Renee's song today. I didn't know that's the one she was going to do, but it does fit so well. When you think about that situation with Jairus' daughter, a child who is dead being brought back to life, right? Pretty phenomenal, right? And we all sit here and we go, oh wow, great, marvelous. But in the back of our mind, what are we asking? Come on, I know we're asking a question. Was she really dead? The question I was asking is, why don't we see that today? And you'll have some well-meaning Bible teachers that will say, well, that was just in the time of Jesus. And that's hogwash, okay? That's a theological term. It's spelled with an H, and that's all I'll tell you, okay? That's hogwash, okay? Because of what the passage that we're looking at today. Jesus makes a statement beginning in verse 8 of chapter 14 of John. He makes a statement in response to Philip's question. So let's read through this and then we'll go back and we'll pick it apart. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. And Jesus said, have I been with you so long, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father, so how can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and that the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak of my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me does his work. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe because of the works themselves. Truly I say to you, listen to this. Truly I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do, and greater works than these he will do, because I go to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. Okay? Because of that statement there in verse 12, we can't ascribe that just to Jesus' time. Because Jesus said, what I've done, you'll do. Right? You see that? Am I making it up? Have I inserted it? I mean, it seems pretty clear to me. Whatever I do, you're going to do. All right, so then we've got to scratch off the board that those things only happened in Jesus' time. Another thing that I hear people say is that, well, that was Jesus. Jesus did things that we can't do, right? Right? You've said that one, right? Yeah, it was a little rumor, right? Yeah. We don't want to admit to that one, but we've all said that. I had a lady tell me one time when we were talking about some issue in her life that she was trying to work through, and I said, well, you know, Jesus, this. She goes, Jesus wasn't human. And I said, well, yes, he was. Actually, he was more than human, right? He's 100% man, but he was also 100% God. I said, but then so are you. Now, don't get nervous. I'm not saying you're 100% God. Trust me, some of you, never mind. None of us are God, all right? I'm not saying that at all. But the reality of the gospel message is that Christ lives in us, right? If you've received Jesus, even that statement, received Jesus, he lives in you. The Spirit of God lives in you, so God lives in you. So you're not just human either. So don't write off to Jesus, wow, Jesus could do that because he was, well, Jesus says that what he's done you should do. Why? Because he's in you. Read Philippians chapter 2 sometime and you'll kind of understand a little bit more on this topic. So then what are we talking about here? Because the surface evidence is that Jesus said what he does, will do, right? Okay. I want to make sure I don't want to lose you, because this is important. So let's go back and let's pick this apart. Peter comes to Jesus, or Philip comes to Peter. You understand whenever I say Peter, I mean anybody else. Okay? Bruce. Yes, you understand that. Philip comes to Jesus one day and he says to Jesus, show us God. Right? And who hasn't heard that question? Maybe it hasn't come that way. Maybe the question has come something like this. Well, if there really is a God, then why did this happen? Right? They're asking for proof of God. Because in their mind, in their thought, in their perception of the world, they have this subtext going. The subtext is this. If God were real, then X wouldn't happen. Right? And so they say, since X happens, God is not real. Unless you can prove to me that God is real. So they come to you and they say, basically, show me God. Right? That's what Philip is saying. He's saying to Jesus, show me God. Prove to me that God is real. Now, the proof that Peter or Philip, Bruce, was looking for. Okay? The proof that he was looking for was what? What was it? Oh, physical. There's God. Right? That's what he was saying. Maybe he was expecting Jesus to reach into his tunic and pull out a Polaroid. This is God and I beside the throne last Easter. Oh, wait a minute. Easter didn't happen yet. Last Hanukkah. Okay? He's looking for physical proof, correct? And whenever somebody asks you that question, they're looking for physical proof, right? Why are they looking for physical proof? Because if you can't touch it, see it, taste it, smell it, as far as we're concerned, it doesn't exist. Correct? Okay, touch the air. See the air. If you're in Phoenix, it's a lot easier. Smell it, same thing. We accept that some things exist even though we can't see them. Matter of fact, in the world of astrophysiology, there is this concept of something called dark matter. And you go, well, what is dark matter? It is matter that is dark. Ha ha! You like that? It's matter they can't see. They say, well, there's matter that we can see. Planets, stars, comets, asteroids. But that doesn't account for the way things operate in space. So cosmologists, cosmologists. Yeah, not cosmetologists. Cosmologist. You can have a cosmologist that's a cosmetologist, but they're not interchangeable, okay? Cosmologists say that probably 97% of the cosmos, the galaxies, the universe, all of creation is made up of dark matter, things that we cannot see. So even on one level, people recognize that there are things that we accept as real that we cannot see. But when it comes to God, well, you know, kind of like that little boy that got caught in the thunderstorm one night and didn't want to go to bed. And his mama said, go to bed, go to bed. And he says, Mama, I'm scared. He said, honey, you know, nothing's going to happen to you. She goes, but you're down here, you know, you're here with me. Well, honey, God's with you too up there. And she said, sometimes, he goes, I just need God's love with skin on it. I just need a little reality to God, something I could touch and feel. And we're all that way, right? Every so often, it's like, you know, I'd like a little proof that God is real. And that's what Philip is saying here. Philip is saying, I'd really like to be able to touch God. Now, I want you to notice Jesus' reaction to Philip's question. First, he doesn't say, you stupid moron, what an idiot question to ask. Of course, he'd say that in the love of God, right? We do that to one another. We go, where's your faith? Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus doesn't look at Philip and go, you know, oh, ye of little faith. Instead, he looks at Philip and he says this, have I been with you so long that you don't know me? Looks at him personally. Philip, how can you say, show me the Father? I've been with you now 3 years and you're asking me to show you the Father? Don't you know me? And can you imagine kind of Philip begins to scratch his head and goes, where are you going? I mean, that's like saying, I'm really hungry, and somebody looks at you and says, well, go wash the dishes and put them away. I don't see the connection. He says in verse 9, he goes on to say, he who has seen me has seen the Father. Let's soak in just a minute. Jesus is telling Philip that who I am is proof that God is. You want to know what God is like? You want to know that God is real? You want to know that God exists? Look at me. He goes on to say in verse 10, do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? Are there not things that you have witnessed, Philip, in our time together that you cannot explain by human explanation? Is there not something about me that you go, there's something more? Have you not recognized in me, Philip, that I'm not like any other man? And I think Philip would have to go, well, yeah. I mean, remember when Jesus would go to temple or he'd go to synagogue and he would teach and they would marvel. They'd say, wow, this guy speaks like I've never heard anyone speak before. There's just something different about him. He's not like any other man. Haven't you seen that in me? The words that I say to you, I don't speak on my own initiative. Instead, it's the Father abiding in me who does his work. I'm not telling you what I have thought of. Paul would put it this way. Paul would say, I didn't come to you with cunningly devised fables or the wisdom of men. Paul says, I came to you in power. I came to you with a gospel that is from beyond what makes sense to humans. Jesus would look at his disciples and say, love those who hate you. And everybody goes, yeah, right. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Somebody smacks you on one cheek, what are you supposed to do? No, don't. That's what Jesus said. You're cleared to fire. You punch them back. That's what we say. He says, haven't you heard what I've said? What I've said doesn't even make sense on a human level. That's God speaking. Where did that come from? That's God in me. So he says, you know me, you see my character, you see my person, you see what I say, and you recognize, you understand that this does not make sense humanly. Then he goes on to say, verse 11, believe in me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe because of the works themselves. He says, look, believe me. You've known me, you've seen me, you've interacted with me, you've lived with me. You know that there's something different about me. You've heard what I've said. You know that there's something different about that. He says, but even if you can't believe me, even if you can't believe your own eyes, he says, take a look at what has happened. Take a look at Jairus' daughter. You know, if Jesus had walked into that house and said, arise, and that child had not, what could we deduce from that? He's a fraud. But there was never any time that Jesus, acting on the impulse of God, speaking at the direction of God, there was never a time that what Jesus did at the behest of God did not happen. If I told you that I could guarantee you 100% return on money invested in a given stock every time, what would you do? You'd buy that stock. That's why the test of a prophet in the Old Testament was that everything he said came true every time. And if he didn't, you stoned him. Because God is never wrong. Jesus said, take a look at what I've done. So, take a look at me, how I am, who I am, what I say. Take a look at the reaction, the results of what I do. How can you say, show us God? There he's been on display before you. Right? Is that what he's saying? I mean, that he's in direct correlation to Philip's question, show me God. He says, I've been showing you God by who I am, by what I say, what I do, and the results of what I do. Why go hang out with the lepers? Well, in our day of social justice, it's the right thing to do. Well, you know, hanging out with lepers is the right thing to do, but that's not why Jesus did it. Why did Jesus go hang out with the lepers? Nope. Had nothing to do with heal them. Because God told him to go. And that glorified God. Why did Jesus go and teach on the Sermon on the Mount? Because he wanted to get a crowd, right? Why did he go teach on the Sermon on the Mount? Because God told him to. That's why he says at the last verse, take a look, verse 15. What does verse 15 say? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. I like to put it this way. If you love me, you'll do what I say. Jesus loved God, and everything that God said, Jesus did. So, in Jesus, God was made manifest to the world. Okay, you want to know what God is like? Take a look at Jesus. I'm telling you, in this side of glory, you will never lay eyes on God because you could not take it in. Okay, you just couldn't. It would be senseless, overwhelming. Your head would explode. But in the person of Christ, that which we cannot comprehend was brought to a place to where we could comprehend it. God walked amongst us. Right? Emmanuel. So he says to Philip, how can you say, show me God? God has been on display to you in who I am, what I say, what I do, and the results of everything. God has been on full display before you. Are you willing to accept that? Yes? No? Maybe? Get back with me in a few days. Are you willing to accept that? Because that's important. That simple truth is important. If you do not accept that, then what he says next means nothing to you. Because I'm about to tell you something that's going to confound you. It's going to test the limits of your reason. And some of you will downright say, you're wrong. So before I go there, I want to make sure that we're in agreement on what Jesus is saying here. Philip, you want to see God. I'm telling you, if you've seen me, you've seen God. You with me? Okay. Take a look at what he says next in verse 12. Verily, verily, truly, truly. You know, when you get into a military aircraft and they strap you in and all of this other stuff, there is one word that is never mentioned once the hatch is closed. And that's eject. And when it is uttered, it's uttered 3 times. Eject, eject, eject. Usually all they need is the first one. Because when your wings have come off, your engine's on fire, you probably don't need a whole lot of prompting. So the pilot will say, eject, eject, eject. You'll hear it sometimes on TV. They'll say, execute, execute, execute. 3 times. Why are they doing that? Because they want to get the point, I'm not just saying the word, I really want you to understand. So Jesus says, truly, truly. This is not just a verily, verily. He wants you to understand, truly, truly. I say to you, he who believes in me. Isn't that the church? The church is a body of people who share a common faith in Jesus Christ. It's not a group of people who have been baptized. It's not a group of people who have been confirmed, christened, who have gone through First Holy Communion. You can do all of that stuff and not have faith in Jesus. You can have your name on the Sunday school roll. You can be the chairman of the deacons. Shoot, examples approve. You can be a pastor and not have faith in Jesus. So he says, those who believe in me, the works that I do, what? He will do. All the ladies go, phew. It says he. No. That's Jesus' way of saying y'all. Those who believe in me will do what I do. Follow me on this. Show me God. Jesus says, you see in who I am, what I say, what I do, and the reaction to that, you see God. Then he turns around and says, you'll do the same thing. Therefore, what? God will be seen in those who believe him. You with me? Prove to me God is real. We should be able to say, if you have a faith in Jesus Christ, if you walk by faith and not by sight, if you've surrendered your life to him, you should be able to say, have I been with you so long that I, in who I am, what I say, what I do, and the reaction to what I do, doesn't prove to you that God is real, nothing will. Because that's what he's saying. Now, you don't like that. I don't like that. It's difficult for us to accept. Why? It's a responsibility, but it's also not our experience. It's not my reality. I look at Jesus and I look at me and I go, the two may never meet. So we walk away from that and say, maybe I need to look at what I'm talking about as having faith in Jesus. You know, you can be a good Baptist and not be a good Christian. You can be a good Methodist and not be a good Christian. You can be a good Catholic, a good Presbyterian, Episcopalian, and not be a good Christian. Because we follow man, we don't follow God. My call as one who says, I believe in Jesus, is to follow Jesus. To look at who he is, what he did, what he said, and to obey, to do what he said. Right? And if I do what Jesus did, if I follow the example that Jesus is, then as God was seen in him, God will be seen in me. And people will not have to say, prove to me God is real, because they'll look at me and they'll go, you know, there's something different about you. Sad thing is there's not. 50% divorce rate amongst Christians. Why? Alcoholism rates are high amongst Christians. Why? Drug abuse rates, pornography rates. Why? Spending. Why? Because we're not following God. We're following the teachings of men. We're trying to be good Baptists or good Presbyterians. If we walk as Christ walked, God will be proven to be real. That's what he's saying. Show me God. Jesus goes, look at me. And those who believe in me will be able to say the same thing. They're going to do the same thing. Matter of fact, they'll do even greater things. Now, don't get don't get nervous and go, wow, how do you do greater than raising the dead? He's not talking about greater in quality. It's kind of hard to top raising the dead. He's talking in quantity. Which is greater, one raised from the dead or two? Two. How many Jesuses were there? How many followers are there? Millions. That's what he means. And indeed, those 11 disciples went out and took the ministry of Jesus throughout the world. Matter of fact, I want to prove this point to you out of the book of Acts. If you go to the 14th chapter of the book of Acts, I want you to see this. We see this, and a lot of times we address it from a different matter. But I want you to see that this proves what I'm saying, what Jesus said. Acts 14, beginning at verse 8. At Lystra, a man was sitting who had no strength in his feet. He was lame. He couldn't walk, paralyzed. Lame from his mother's womb, who had never walked. This man was listening to Paul as he spoke, who, when he had fixed his gaze on him and had seen that he had faith to be made well, said in a loud voice, "Stand upright on your feet," and he leaped up and began to walk. Does that sound like Jesus? So Paul's doing what Jesus did, right? Okay. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they raised their voice, saying in the Lycaonian language, "The gods have become like men and have come down to us." And they begin calling Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. So they saw in these guys what? Something different. These are not normal guys. So in their culture, in their mindset, they think of Zeus and Hermes. Now, you go on to read it, and you quickly realize Paul and Peter, whoa. It's not us. You know? Which is a good thing to do. When God works in your life, please don't go and, thank you very much. Don't do that. God will not share his glory with another. But they realized the working in these guys' lives was not normal. When was the last time somebody looked at you and said you weren't normal? Think about that a minute. When was the last time somebody looked at you and saw God? Saw God in the way you treat your spouse, saw God in the way you treat your boss, saw God in the things you say, saw God in the person that you are, saw God in the things that you do, saw God in the reactions to the things that you do. When was the last time somebody saw God? That's what Jesus is talking about. People want to wonder why God is real. That's a recriminating comment to the church, that they don't see him in us. Jesus goes on to say this, and a lot of theological ink has been spilt trying to leap over this comment. "Whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. Now, the wealth and health and prosperity doctrine people have told you that you could claim a fancy car and a fancy house and God would give it to you. And I would agree with that, if that would bring glory to God's name. Isn't that what it says right there? Whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, so that what? The Father may be glorified. Not you, not me. I'll do whatever it takes to glorify God. You know what glorify means? That He is seen. I'll do, Jesus says, I am giving, remember Matthew 28, I am giving to you my authority. I'm giving you, I'm behind you, I'm backing you up. And I'll do anything it takes to glorify God. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask. And I will do anything to glorify God. Now we take that to say, well, I got to say, in the name of Jesus, I want a fancy house. In the name of Jesus, like it's a USDA stamp of approval. I asked in His name. That's not what He's talking about. He's not talking about form. He's saying, are you submitted to me? Are you living the life that I'm living? I am behind you to glorify God. And I'll do whatever it takes to glorify God. Anything it takes to glorify God. If raising the dead will glorify God, I'll do it. If not raising the dead will glorify God, I'll do it. If blessing your life will glorify God, I'll do it. If not blessing your life will glorify God, I'll do it. If making you rich will glorify God, I'll make you rich. If making you poor will glorify God, I'll make you poor. Because Jesus is all about glorifying God, letting Him be seen. Are you? No. Most of us are about glorifying ourselves, glorifying our church, glorifying our concept of religion. But if you believe in Jesus, then you believe in what He valued. And what He valued was God. Folks, the world doesn't need more religion. It really, really, really doesn't. Doesn't need another set of rules and regulations. It doesn't need a new place to go. It needs an encounter with God. And God, for reasons that are God's, has chosen to reveal Himself through His people. Those who have entered into a relationship with Him. And we have taken that wonderful blessing and turned it inward and said, God is all about blessing me. When He says, man, I love you and I'm going to take care of you, but I'm all about showing me. You know, if God was concerned about you above Himself, God would be an idolater. If He loved you more than He loves Him, He'd be an idolater. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. If God didn't do that, He'd be an idolater. So why would He love you more than He loves Him? He loves you. Take a look at the cross. He loves you. But He loves Himself more. Don't take that egotistical. That's us. That's sinful self-love. God loves Himself because He knows He's the best thing going. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And He wants people to know Him. And He is determined that through the life of those who have put their trust in Him, He will make Himself known. What an awesome thing. That's what Jesus meant when He said, you're a city on a hill. You're a light that shines in the darkness. Philip says to Jesus, show me God. And Jesus says, look at me. And then He says, Philip, people are going to look at you. Show them God. How about you?